These New York charges, residential mortgage fraud, among them, one of the most serious. So he's looking at 1 to 3 years minimum, 8 to 25 years maximum. These are huge ranges, but those would be inescapable, right? There's nothing a president can do to pardon on a state charge. James is the first Attorney General of New York to be indicted by the Justice Department, and it follows a nearly 6-month investigation into claims of mortgage fraud. Now, that is a charge the United States Justice Department rarely brings against individuals, but of course, James is not an ordinary individual. Trump considers her an enemy after she sued him in 2022, accusing Trump of lying about his real estate empire and the inflating the value of his properties.
You know, if it's just like a question of everybody prosecuting the person who prosecuted them, we will be in endless cycles of political and prosecutorial vengeance.
There are so many different corrupt sycophants within the Trump administration, including but not limited to within the Department of Justice. Now, these people don't have immunity. And the reality is the statute of limitations is 5 years, and there will be accountability with the next administration, if not before, when Democrats take back control of the House of Representatives.
Boy. So we got to continue our coverage of the mainstream liberal media going into major cope mode over Letitia James being indicted for bank fraud, okay? Because Letitia James, Democrats, the mainstream liberal media told us for years that nobody is above the law, right? Including politicians, the President of the United States, President Trump, right? When Letitia James was going after President Trump, when Jack Smith and Fannie Pack Willis and Alvin Bragg was going after Trump, none of these people said, hey, you know, are all of these people conspiring to go after the former president in order to prevent him from becoming president again, right? Like, is there something weird going on here, right? Is this political? And they all tried to do it at the same time, right? That's the crazy part. They all tried to line up their trials, Trump's conviction, right before the election, right? That's the funny part about it, okay? Some of the things against Trump might have worked had they not all waited to try to line it up to happen right before the election for the maximum negative consequence for the Republicans, right? This is what they all tried to do. Clearly, this was coordinated, right? Clearly, this was political. But the mainstream liberal media denied it. It said it doesn't exist. It's impossible. A grand jury indicted Trump, right? Therefore, it's legit. He just needs to fight it out, right? If he's guilty, he's guilty. If he's not guilty, he's not guilty, right? We got to see. Now, all of a sudden, for Letitia James, we'll see is different. You don't understand, right? According to CNN, everybody commits mortgage fraud, right? The excuses from the media, the cope from the media is really unbelievable. Take a look.
Aside for a second, what Tish James, and again, we're still getting the details, but if it's related to this mortgage issue, I mean, this is something that everyone in America, or many people at least, if you're lucky enough to be able to buy a house in America, you deal with this, right? The federal government doesn't go after all of these people for doing this.
According to PolitiFact, the day after she was elected in 2018, Letitia James was asked by a community activist if she was going to sue President Trump, and she replied, quote, "Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally." I mean, that's not a great look for somebody who has just been elected or just been campaigning, who hasn't even looked, I guess, at deeply at any evidence.
Well, that's, you know, we live in a system where attorneys general and district attorneys well, I mean, it's a bizarre case in many respects. First of all, it's incredibly small potatoes. This is a house that was purchased for $137,000 in 2020, a year when the average house in America was sold for $383,000. So any mortgage, any insurance on a house of that value is going to be very small, and in ordinary circumstances wouldn't draw the attention of the Department of Justice. But more importantly, what is so chilling about this case is that ever since Watergate, presidents have imposed on themselves the rule that they do not interfere in criminal prosecutions, much less demand them. But here you have a demanded prosecution, and one that the career people in the Eastern District of Virginia thought was an unworthy case. That's a really chilling example of how the criminal justice system is not supposed to work. Just because she made inappropriate comments, that doesn't mean she should get indicted for fraud years later. I mean, we're not supposed to live in a system of that kind of tit for tat. Criminal cases are supposed to stand or fall on their own.
Campaign trail, President Trump promised retribution for his political opponents. Is that what these charges are, or do you think that they have merit?
Well, we'll have to see if they have merit. That's up to a judge and jury to decide later on. What we do know is that these were certainly people who the president had chosen the defendant first before he knew what the crimes were. So usually in the Justice Department, you would find out what a crime is, then figure out who the defendant is. That's usually the general trajectory of criminal prosecutions. What's unusual about this situation is it feels like the president picked the defendants and then essentially ordered his Justice Department, find the crime, I've already chosen the defendants.
So the indictment accuses James of falsely claiming in loan documents that she would use a home she purchased in Virginia as a second residence. That allowed her then to get a better interest rate. Instead, they say she used this home as a rental property. Put this into context for us. How often would DOJ prosecute a case like this?
So bank fraud, or what we consider mortgage fraud type cases, are very common. They're, something that most U.S. attorneys' offices around the country do on a routine basis. What's different about this case is it is involving a very small amount of money, right? We're talking, almost $19,000. This is not the kind of case that most U.S. attorneys' offices are bringing. Usually they're looking for, mortgage schemes or things that involve a much higher monetary threshold. What jumps out at me is not the fact that it's a mortgage fraud case, but the amount.
And, you have to put this into the broader context of that now deleted post that Trump made on his Twitter.
We are seeing Republicans argue that it was James who did political prosecutions. This from New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. James, quote, illegally weaponized her office to conduct a political witch hunt against Democrats, political opponents, most notably President Donald J. Trump. Again, that is a statement from Elise Stefanik. She goes on to call the charges specific and damning. What do you say to the argument, essentially, that James used her office for political revenge first?
That investigation was a multi-year investigation handled by career and seasoned lawyers and investigators in her office. It received in court, she was successful. The Trump organization and his family has a right to appeal it. What they cannot do is take the criminal justice system of this nation and say, because you sued me for something that courts have held me liable for, I'm going to indict you on bogus charges. And for Elise Stefanik and everyone else to defend this and say supposedly they're concerned about weaponization, but it's okay to have an indictment signed by one person who has never prosecuted a case, not a single career prosecutor would sign their name to it. I've indicted a lot of cases as Attorney General. I have never signed an indictment without any career prosecutors joining me. And nor would I, for a very simple reason. That's not how the rules work.
Yeah, so if that's the case, what's the point of having a grand jury? Right? What's the point? Apparently, these charges are so strong against Letitia James that the rookie, right, the no experience, right, the no experienced prosecutor, this is how the mainstream liberal media is framing this, the no experienced prosecutor, right, got an indictment done super quickly, right? Apparently, they were expecting for an indictment to take hours, right, for the grand jury to decide. No, they did that quickly, right? She presented the case, and they were like, yeah, sounds about right to me, needs to go to trial. Right? The case against Letitia James apparently is that strong, okay? So it's funny to me because if/win, and I'm leaning more so towards win, right, at this point, Letitia James is found guilty, what would the excuse be? Well, see, she might be guilty, but Trump still should not have went after her. The Justice Department should not have went after her, right? It's still wrong, even though she's guilty. Now, it's amazing because we know for a fact, when Trump was going through all this, none of this logic ever applied, right? At all. Okay? And see, now what they're saying is that, well, see, it doesn't matter if Letitia James went after Trump, right? That doesn't matter. We can't do this tit for tat, right? We can't be going back and forth. We can't do that. That's wrong. Because going back and forth is going to lead us to a bad place. Wait. So you try to tell me that Democrats should be allowed to go after their political opponents and that their political opponents should not punish Democrats for doing that, right? So again, what is the incentive for Democrats not to do that if there's no punishment? What's the incentive? So it's okay for Democrats to do it and we're not supposed to respond, right? We're not supposed to retaliate? No. That's not how it works, right? It's not how it works. But that's the way that Democrats want it to work. Because, again, even when the media acknowledges that, yeah, Letitia James is on camera basically saying that she's going to weaponize her office to go after President Trump. But we can't have the back and forth. You don't understand? She should be punished for it, right? Even though we know it's wrong, she should be punished. We can't punish her because she's a Democrat, right? She's a black woman. That's the argument that has been made on national television, right? Just when you thought that the media and that these liberals, they couldn't sink any lower, right? They just continue to show you, there's no floor, right? There's no floor with these people, right? The hypocrisy is stunning. It's in your face. So without further ado, let's react to the CNN panel and their discussion on Letitia James facing accountability.
What is fueling this campaign, what is fueling my soul right now is Trump and his abuses. Abuses against immigrants, against women, against our environment. We need an attorney general who will stand up to Donald Trump. And we need an attorney general who understands and knows the law and who recognizes that no one is above the law, including the president of these United States.
Again, amazing. This woman's campaign, her whole career is about going after Trump, right? But for whatever reason, people think that she's a victim when she gets the exact same type of energy that she put out into the world, right? Nobody had a problem with this. Hey, is it a problem for this woman to be campaigning on throwing Trump in jail, right? Don't you think that's an issue, right? Don't you think that, hey, this might not be right? Nobody had a problem with it when she was doing this. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You know what's interesting? She named all the things she was mad at Trump over, but then she went after him on mortgage fraud as a civil case, which just always struck me as, I've just got to find something here to satisfy my political base. Also, I don't understand why being a political foe of Donald Trump makes you immune from having to follow the law. If she did it,
her case,
then a jury will, adjudicate.
The case was not an $18,000 case, was it? It was millions case. If you buy,
yeah, but Judge, there's not a qualifier.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that was a case. That's a case that any prosecutor. I was a former federal prosecutor. Okay. No prosecutor would have brought this case for $18,000. It's just too small. That's the way it works. But for millions, which it wasn't brought, this was not an indictment against Trump. It was a civil case.
She tried to bankrupt him. She tried to ruin his life and try to make it so he couldn't run for president.
So what are we going to do?
She brought forward a case that she thought was meritorious, and it was found that it was meritorious.
By the way,
Now, so again, I just want you guys to understand how liberals don't think that logic doesn't apply to this, right? That logic doesn't apply to the case against Letitia James, right? Again, notice how they never discussed the actual evidence, right? They never discussed the fact that this woman signed a legal power of attorney, right? A power of attorney stating that she lived in a place that she did not live as Attorney General of New York, right? That's what she did. Okay, she knowingly misrepresented where she stayed and her intent on these documents to get a lower rate. And this is a pattern of behavior that Letitia James has been participating in for years, right? For a decade. Apparently, Letitia James has a real estate property where she has misrepresented how many units she had, right? In order to, again, presumably get a lower interest rate. Okay, she has had documentation stating that she's married to her father, right? Again, presumably to get financial benefits. Again, it's a pattern of behavior that we're seeing over and over and over again. But for whatever reason, these people think that, well, see, you don't understand. Letitia James, when she went after Trump, even though she campaigned on going after Trump, it was meritorious, right? It was legit. It was justified, right? It was justified, even though she literally campaigned on going after her political opponent. But it was justified. Now, again, they think that Trump is going after Letitia James, right, for being his political opponent. And they're saying, well, see, this is not justified, right? It's not meritorious. But again, you're not discussing the actual evidence, right, in the case. They don't want to talk about evidence. I personally think that Letitia James is going to be found guilty. I think that she's going to get convicted, right? And again, part of me, the reason why I believe this is because her case is so airtight, right? I mean, it is clear as day. What she did and her intent, it is clear as day. And when she's convicted, I wonder what these people are going to say. I guarantee you they're not going to say, well, she was convicted, so I guess that this was justified. They're not going to say that, which is what they're saying about Trump, right? They're saying, well, see, it doesn't matter if Letitia James campaigned on going after him. We know that the case had merit because she was successful, right? Even though on Trump's appeal, he got rid of the damages, right? Basically, the punishment that she tried to levy against him, he won on that, and he's still appealing the rest of it. But regardless, the point is that these people, again, they don't have any principles, right? There is no consistent logic behind their opinions. It's just, well, what Democrats do is good, what Republicans do is bad, right? That's it. That's what we have here.
God, she failed in her ultimate goal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be bringing these hostages
Scott,
on Monday.
I mean, wasn't the argument about that case, that civil case that she brought, that there were no victims to the alleged wrongdoing?
That was always
wasn't that the argument?
One of the
so then wouldn't, if you were to apply that to this situation, how do you justify then charging her over $18,000, which by the way, again, like, those are allegations. We don't know if there were communications between her and the mortgage company about the change of a change of status for the property or anything like that. We don't know about that. But do you think that this is more of a crime with a victim than the one against Trump?
I can only read back to you her own words. When powerful people cheat to get better loans, it comes at the expense of hardworking people. That's what James said. That's the standard she applied to Trump.
So you think that applies to Trump then?
I think we're.
I mean, she thought it did.
So Scott, hold on. Do you think that applies to Trump? If you think it applies to her, fine.
I'm giving you
her
justification for prosecuting him was that.
Do you think it
I don't know why they wouldn't apply.
Listen, as they say, two wrongs don't make a right. She's either wrong about Trump or you're wrong about Trump. Which one is it?
No, look, she brought the case. She went through the process in New York. What happened happened. Now she's got a case against her.
So
the process
Trump's case
will
was
play
legitimate then, in your mind?
Oh, I don't think it should have ever been brought. I think it was a travesty.
But you can't have it both ways. One way with Trump and one way with
They're two different cases.
They are not. You cannot have them two different ways.
Go ahead,
I totally agree with that. And this video that you showed is even premature. This goes way back to 2018 when she ran. The quote she said is, I'm going to shine a light into every dark corner of Donald Trump's real estate dealings. And now that's what's happening to her. A prosecutor is shining that light.
Yeah, but she wasn't a real estate developer.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. What she was saying was it was
one second. Hold on. Let me let the
corrupt
judge
business.
finish
I'm
her
saying
thought, please.
that case, civil case, was about a corrupt business. A man who spent years and decades in New York with real estate, and she knew that. And a lot of folks have had a lot of doubts about Trump for a long time when it comes to finances. This wasn't new. So she had a basis.
I think in her debate, though, she wasn't complaining about his real estate. She was complaining about all the political issues.
She's talking about the quote
and then
that
she
Tim
went after that. I mean, it was obviously
She's
political.
talking about the quote that Tim brought up, which was about the real estate.
What she said in that campaign.
Yeah. So again, it's amazing to me all of the excuses these people will come up with in order to justify what Democrats do, right? And I know that Abby Phillip thought that she was doing something there, right? When she tried to basically say, well, if you say that Trump's charges were not legit, then how can you say that Letitia James's charges are legit, right? I know that she thinks that that's a gotcha, but the reality is this, right? Letitia James decided that she was going to weaponize her office to go after her opponent. She made that clear that that's what she was doing. Regardless of the merits of that case, we know that that case would not have been brought against a Democrat. We know for a fact she would not have brought against that case against anybody except Trump, right? Even the judges doing the hearing were like, yeah, we typically don't see these type of cases, right? Especially, again, considering how it was basically a victimless crime. So the real question is, why do you think it's okay for her to do it and to not be punished, right? Do you think it's okay for Democrats to do this and for them not to be punished because you don't want to see a tit for tat, right? How would you suggest, this is the question I would have put back to Abby Phillip. How would you suggest that we punish somebody like Letitia James if you're admitting that what she did was political, right? It was a political prosecution. How would you suggest we stop political prosecutions if nobody ever faces any punishment for it, right? Are you telling me that we're supposed to be okay? We're supposed to live in a world where Democrats are allowed to do this and to get away with it, but Republicans can't? You think that's going to fix it? Of course it's not going to fix it. It's going to encourage more, right? It's just going to be from one side. What will actually fix it is if both sides understand that, if we go down this rabbit hole, then we're going to destroy ourselves, right? But if there's no chance of one side destroying themselves, then they're going to keep doing it, right? If there's no punishment. So, I mean, at the end of the day, this should be a lesson to Democrats. Hey, don't do this, and then we won't be subject to it. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. So, you know, we're going to see what happens to Letitia James. If she's guilty, she's guilty. If she's innocent, she's innocent. You got to let it play out in the court of law. And if/when she's found guilty, I personally believe when she's found guilty, you're going to hear more mental gymnastics about how, oh, even though she was found guilty, it's still not legit for X, Y, and Z reasons, right? Even though they're using those same arguments to somehow justify what happened to Trump. These people are massive hypocrites. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.